The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host. Today on the Clean Power Hour, hydrogen paste that stores 10 times the energy of lithium ion. Solar power is powering a helicopter on Mars. We have a new Mars rover. We're going to talk about that. And the Texas grid failed really horribly, but if you had a microgrid, you were okay. So solar plus storage can save you from these kinds of horrible grid outages. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour, to the Commercial Solar Guy, my co-host, John Weaver.
Timothy, how do you do today? Hope the upper Midwest, hope the Midwest is treating you well. Has it warmed up a little?
Spring is in the air, John. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's in the 40s. There's still snow on the ground, but it's melting and it's really nice outside. The birds are chirping. They're so happy. We had horribly cold weather last week. It's amazing how it can go from just freezing to thawing, but the thaw's on.
We had some rain overnight, and I had a nice little thick layer of ice all over my car, except I was able to warm it up from my phone app without having to go outside. And so I had just two melted patches of ice on my windows, and I drove perfectly to work. It was a great little Tesla moment.
I love that feature about the Tesla. You could just use your smartphone to warm it up. I do that all the time. I did, and
Yep.
I do love that. I saw a review where the reviewer was complaining that it takes 30 seconds for the app to wake up the car. And I'm just curious why it takes that long, because the signal goes from the phone through the Wi-Fi to the car. Like, you would think it
Well,
would be a little faster, but I'm glad I can do it, period. So it's not a point of contention for me.
Well, you also have to wake up the car. Sometimes when you get in the car, you'll notice there's computer stuff going on. And so when the car is on standby, so when I park my car, I power it off. I don't know if you do that. And
No.
I power it off. It saves a little bit of energy. There's no cameras running. There's
Yeah.
minimal battery drain, because you could lose five miles over the course of a day. Especially if you turn on all the features with all the cameras running and everything, you could spend 10 hours or 10 miles, 20 miles a day recording every leaf falling. And so for me, when I press it, I know that the car has to turn on and wake up, and the hard drives have to spin up and whatever. Well, maybe not hard drives spinning up, solid state. So my hypothesis is it's there. So,
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Dojo has to wake up. Do we have Dojo in our cars?
I don't think so yet.
No.
I think that's the supercomputer that does the programming and does the analysis. I don't think it may extend. I mean, unless you have the beta FSD full self-driving package, I don't think you definitely don't have it yet. But maybe you do. Maybe they're slipping it in there slowly working it. Who knows?
I want Dojo just because it sounds badass.
I think it's just a computer, or is it software on a computer? Because it's a supercomputer, I thought. Maybe it's the back end, the software tool being used to just write the software, the full self-driving, the
I should know
environment.
this. I should know this because I keep reading and hearing about Dojo, but I haven't been able to distinguish, is it software or hardware or both? I'm guessing it's both, but
Yeah.
well, hey, let's talk about Power Paste.
Yep.
It's a great
Power
it's a
paste.
it's a great name, and story out of Fraunhofer. Which, if you don't know about Fraunhofer, you want to know about Fraunhofer. They're a very technical research institute in Germany, and they do research on all kinds of things. It's kind of like NREL plus NYSERDA plus plus plus. So what do you think about this Power Paste?
Well, first off, this 10x energy density thing, that's not trivial. That, in fact, that's the opposite of trivial. That is potentially very significant. 10 times the energy density of batteries must put this somewhere near the energy density of hydrocarbons. And if it's not, batteries are almost close enough. This little, I'm just going to say it this way. If this hydrogen paste were to meet the ideas that I think it can, it would fix energy storage, depending on the round trip efficiency. I mean, that's really where it comes down to, because this looks like a non-volatile material that's super dense. it's just stored in buckets, or, for them, they're starting off with like little scooters just so they can get it into the market. But 10x the energy density of a lithium ion battery. And a lithium ion battery is somewhere in the 250 watts per kilogram. If you can either have more, if the mass is higher or the volume, whichever one it is, that just seems really significant. And one of the reasons it does really well with this energy density, and I don't know if it's a workaround that kills this idea, but it's that the hydrogen paste, when it mixes with water, it actually rips apart the water, and it uses the hydrogen in the water to be part of the energy producing catalyst. So the density is related to water, so they're going to be carrying some sort of liquid, but water's pretty dense. And I don't know, I'm just really interested in this because it feels like this could be a very significant thing. We could store hydrogen at densities better than liquid hydrogen, cold hydrogen, ways that we're doing it now. And if that's the case, and it can be stored without leaking in a non-combustible format, we could just produce this all summer long and put it in giant containers. And then as winter comes, we'll slowly use it up. And then every summer we'll slowly fill up these containers extra. We'll have these giant vats. Maybe we'll just have a shipping container of a truck go out to a solar plant, and whenever it overproduces and it has to get the excess electricity would get dumped or something, we just have it slowly producing hydrogen. And every time we fill up another shipping container, don't take it, drop it, put a new one in, store that shipping container somewhere, and we could just like, and I don't know. I this feels significant, and I want to watch this. So
Yeah, it
watch it.
says according to the story, the paste is as energy dense as gasoline, so that's good.
Oh, there it is.
On a volume, an energy density basis. I was talking to Sam Kalish at Rewiring America on the Solar Podcast just before this, and one of the things we talked about is, how, and we're going to talk about this also on the Clean Power Hour now, about microgrids and batteries. A power wall has 13 and a half kilowatt hours of energy in it. Our Model Y long range has 65 kilowatt hours. And so the Model Y is effectively 5 power walls. And so you see the importance of vehicle to grid. Even though Elon isn't particularly excited about vehicle to grid, he's like, yeah, maybe not. And I'm not sure why he's not so enthusiastic about that. Maybe he wants to sell power walls. Could be. I just don't know. I would personally, I'd rather just use my car. And obviously you need solar, because in a grid outage, in order to, you gotta have a source. The car is a bank, and the battery bank is useful for a couple of days. Maybe we use about 10 kWh per day per household in America. 10 to 11, I think, is the average. And so you have, potentially a couple days of off grid, especially if you're just running certain loads. But then you need solar to charge it up again, and you need sunlight. So you got to hope that there's sun and not just super cloudy weather, which would, so it's not enough to just have solar. You need solar and storage. And, but heck, I think we need multiple sources of energy also, right? It's not enough to put all your eggs in the solar plus battery. I'd rather have some hydrogen paste in buckets that I could also then feed into the whatever. Is this a fuel cell technology? I guess it must be, huh?
I would guess. I mean, they have a machine right there also that they in the article, and that's the machine that I don't think that processes it, but that makes the material. And
Yeah, they say it's a PEM fuel cell, PEM fuel cell. So
there you go. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
And I definitely want hydrogen in the mix. It's coming, as we've said many times now on the show.
Yeah. The Europeans are going to spend a massive amount of money on hydrogen for their heating. And that's, and then industrial. And they're starting smart. Like this paste is from Fraunhofer. They very specifically said it. Hey, we're going to make the paste and we're going to put it in scooters. And it's like, what? Scooters? But what that means is that That's their opening statement. That's where they get the product so that they can get some being made, so they can get some engineering time, upgrading the machines, making the process better. So I'm hopeful. That's a neat little thing. I want to see it happen.
So the other exciting news besides the Texas grid failing is that we landed a new rover on Mars, and
We actually did more than just land a rover on Mars.
it's called
So
Perseverance. So here are the final moments of Perseverance landing. The system uses a parachute to slow it down.
well, it had. So can I tell you what was? So it started off with a parachute. That was the lower stage. There's a rocket ship that then drops these ropes. What you're seeing right now is Perseverance. Now the question is, who's filming Perseverance? Of course, it's the aliens. But what's really happening is that directly above Perseverance right now is a ship, a rocket ship that we flew it there. It
Yeah.
fell in, it slowed down. A few minutes ago, a second ago, you saw a big piece of metal fall off. That was the bottom of it. And now there's a flying rocket ship right now above this dude that's and it's going down. And then this thing goes down on an elevator. So that's what's happening right now. This thing is lowering to the, and
So
look,
there's
that's the rocket above it.
Yep,
Oh,
there's the lander above it, the Mars lander. It's akin to the lunar lander, right? It kind of has that architecture, but those are, yes, rockets that are similar to what SpaceX does, right? It's a vertical landing, and first slowed with parachutes and then rockets.
and
And
technically
then
this, the rover, the sky crane is what it's called. It's not designed to land nicely. After it drops off the rover, it's just going to fly away and crash. That's what it does.
yeah, I,
But look
I,
at this.
I
This is
only
a
I only
helicopter.
wish they had some footage of the heat shield landing. I want to see the crater from the heat shield, and I want to see the crater from the the Mars lander. But anyway, it's a huge success and completely non-trivial that we can do this, sending a rocket from Earth to Mars and then landing with the sky crane. I love that name. But even cooler, right, is that there is a solar and lithium powered helicopter on board, which I think we should dive into your Twitter feed on this. Um, and by
It's
the
a
way,
Mars. It's a Mars
if you want to
helicopter.
find John Weaver on Twitter, you have to go Solar and Mass. He's the commercial solar guy, but he's Solar and Mass on Twitter, which makes sense because he is solar in mass. But here's the helicopter. It's a beauty. And that thing is big, John. Those blades are like 4 or 5 feet in diameter.
Yeah, there's a picture later on. You get to see it relative to a human. It's pretty cool. It doesn't weigh much. It's only like 4 or 5 pounds. It's a very light unit, super, super light.
Yeah.
The rectangle on the top, those are the solar cells.
Nice
Yeah,
view
there
of the
you go.
solar panels there. Yep.
The solar cells are the same cells, well, made by the same company that's on the International Space Station group, I think based down in Arizona. They're about 32-ish percent efficient. And the helicopter is fully powered. Oh, yeah. So it's stored on the bottom of the rover. And
Wow.
if you go into the next tweet, you'll like actually see a little process where they have a little video of how they launch it. It's kind of neat. Yeah, there you go. So it's not very magical, but it's a dunk, and it just the unit just gets lowered and then it gets launched,
Oh,
and
that's
it's going to
cool.
be yeah, and then they're going to put it out and so it's just stuck to the bottom of it,
Why are the
and
blades so big?
because the air is really thin on Mars, so we have like 10% of the atmosphere. And so you need long blades so it can get any kind of lift. And the lift it's tough to fly. It's just a tougher environment to fly in. And
Yeah, a
so there it
lot
is.
tougher.
Yeah.
Um,
So
that was
that's the way
that's
this little solar powered helicopter is being launched from the bottom of this, and it's fully solar and fully battery. That's it.
yeah.
It's the engine, the motor outputs up to 350-ish watts. That's what this thing needs. It's only designed to fly for like a few hundred meters away, and 15 to 20 feet up. Yeah, if you scroll down to the next, there's one
I'll
or two
keep
more.
going. I'll keep going. I just like to go back and forth.
Okay, okay. There's
Um,
some spec pages, and then you can see another image of the other rover, Curiosity, that this company is on as well. So it's just neat. It's neat that we're able to make solar cells that work on a planet that's twice as far from the sun. Yeah, those cells right there. And we're doing amazing things. We have a solar powered helicopter flying on Mars. How's that, dude? Solar
yeah,
powered
I
helicopter
love
on.
this. I love Perseverance because it's inspired me to learn more about Mars. And, Elon Musk has a plan to colonize Mars. NASA's not quite so ambitious, but that is the raison d'etre for SpaceX, is to colonize Mars. And as I've said on the show, it has become apparent that he makes all of his decisions based on if it moves that ball down the field, getting to Mars sooner. Um, but the Mars is so inhospitable. I didn't know this. I knew it was inhospitable, but I didn't realize how inhospitable. The average temperature is like minus 70 Fahrenheit. It is like in the inner part of Antarctica. Um, so not only is the sun really dim, it's half as dim or more, right?
Yep.
And the atmosphere is really thin. It has a very thin atmosphere. You establish that. The poor little helicopter has to spin its blades at 2,300 RPM. A regular helicopter here on Earth is more like 500 RPM.
Wow.
So it's a 5x faster blade spin, just so it can get the lift, right?
Yep.
And but that's going to be awesome. I can't wait to get some photos or videos from the helicopter. But man, I do not want to go to Mars. I am glad that somebody wants to. Elon did once say that he wants to die on Mars, but I think he's backed off on that. You don't hear him talking about that a whole lot. Um,
Maybe he doesn't think he's gonna die. Maybe he's got some insider information on some stem cell.
with a few Neuralinks, yeah, we're all going to be uploaded and live forever. So
Yeah.
I don't want to live forever.
Why not?
I wouldn't mind living 90 years or 100 years, but forever, that's an awful long time.
Maybe we'll get to a certain point where this is a dream of mine, sort of. Let's say, okay, we can make you live forever. We'll let you have a planet, but we're gonna have to like put you into a deep freeze, except for your brain, rest of your body. We're gonna put you in a satellite or a little spaceship. We're just gonna launch you as fast as possible, and your brain is gonna be kind of the operating system for this little satellite, and it's gonna get you there. And then, it's your planet. Figure it out. You might not live very long there, but it's, I think something, hopefully we send like 20, 30 people to the same planet. So,
Yeah.
there's somebody to hang out with.
I think we need to figure out how to travel as photons. Photons are clearly a superior technology than flesh and blood. I just don't think flesh and blood is really good for space travel. But photons are pretty obviously good at space travel.
Mhm.
And that's amazing. All right, you got a story about polysilicon supplier Shinti Energy, and this is all Greek to me, but I care about polysilicon.
So Shinti is one of the largest manufacturers of polysilicon, and they have a problem. They have a problem that they're located in Xinjiang, which is in Western China, and it's where Uyghur forced labor camps probably exist. We already know there are worker training camps, whatever the official Chinese position on it is. The opinions of this work ranges from genocide through something less than that, none of which are good things. It's the Chinese state imposing its will and attempting to take over a region. And very recently, in the last few months, the solar industry, and I remember seeing the letter first going across, and I'm like, why is the solar industry signing this? But the solar industry in general has started to push this no forced labor product and saying, listen, we can't deal with this. This is not going to be our thing. And this, I saw an interview from Abby Hopper, or at least the U.S. solar industry is saying it. I saw an interview from Abby Hopper. She's the CEO of SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and she said very clearly that she sees by June, July, this forced labor problem disappearing. And what I think is that Genti, who is this manufacturer, they have signed an agreement to make poly 200,000 megatons, which is about 40% of global capacity, to make poly in a city that's about 2,100 kilometers away from Xinjiang, and just pretty much due east. Now the question is this company making new capacity, or are they moving their capacity? And if they're moving their capacity, are they also moving the workers with it? Because moving a human being is easier than moving a manufacturing line. And that's my opinion, is that's what's going on, is that they're moving their facilities out of the region. They're probably not going to build new, or they will build new. And this material that's going to be left in the region will be used to feed internal Chinese customers, because obviously China's going to install 65, 70 gigs, 55 to 70 gigs of solar. That's going to use half, a third of the world's polysilicon, and about 200 megatons worth, if that's what's in Xinjiang, owned by Genti, that would about feed China. So either A, this new volume is to leave the old volume for Chinese purchasing, or B, it's completely moving the old volume. And we'll see. We'll see what's going on with it. It's something not trivial what that announcement was, and we'll see more about it in the future.
Yep. Yeah, the forced labor situation in China is certainly something that we in the industry want to pay attention to. We also want to pay attention to the carbon footprint of all of these materials, which we learned on the solar podcast from the ultra low carbon solar alliance, that some panels have twice the carbon footprint of others at the same price. It's just that the energy is dirty versus the energy is clean. So if you can buy clean solar panels, you want to do that. Check out the Ultra Low Carbon Solar Alliance. Hey, you got a good story here about the penetration of wind and solar reaching upwards of 10%. And that graph is now on screen. What does this mean to you, John?
It means that there is a points that we've crossed. We are, the way the author of the paper, this article, the way he said we're in the last exponent. There's little statements, little truisms, or whatever that people like to say. They say the first one's always the hardest. The first million is the hardest. The first billion is the hardest. And statistically speaking, that's true, because you're moving up one exponent when you move into that next full number. Solar and renewables have moved from 0.1% of U.S. electricity about the year 1980 to greater than 10% in 30 years, 40 years. So in my lifetime, solar has moved from, or renewables have moved from less than 0.1% to 10%. That's two exponent expansions, 0.1 to 1, 1 to 10. That's a 100x growth, percentage wise, and that's not trivial. That's a lot of volume. It probably means that wind and solar are going to go to 85%, and it means that there's nothing that's going to stop it now. The volume has grown. The rates are still going up. We're moving into the fat part of the curve. We've gotten through the hard, challenging pieces. We've done significant amounts of innovation. We can build a grid that can handle 80% wind plus solar today. We have the tech. We haven't scaled it yet. We don't have enough batteries yet to deploy 5.4 terawatt hours across the United States just yet to bring us to 80%. But we know the batteries. We know what they're going to cost. We know that they're going to cost less. We know that we can do it. And getting to 10%, getting to that last exponent, it's it's just a nice thing to do. It takes a lot of work to get there, and crossing that precipice, that's not trivial. 10%, man. That's a lot. That's a lot of electricity we're making. And the numbers are going to keep falling. The capacity's growing. Solar, we haven't even seen the big bump from wind and solar that hit last year. I mean, we had a huge capacity. We had 20 gigs of solar and like 20 gigs of wind. That's like 1/5 of the solar deployed total and a little under 1/5 of the wind. That's like adding 5 years. That's adding the 80s and the 90s and probably through 2010 too. That just added, last year we added our first 30 years probably. And this year's going to be more. And so it's like we're going to go from 10 to 12 to 14. We're going to be at 15 in like 3 years. And they're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? You just crossed 10. Yep, here we are. And it's going to be big chunky volumes, meaning, Tim, you and I, as long as we hold on to it, we have jobs for a little while.
It's interesting that total power generation has plateaued starting in the mid 2000s, around 4.5 terawatt hours, 4,500 terawatt hours, excuse me.
Yep.
And that is going to increase too, right? As we electrify transportation, we're going to need more kWh on the grid, and we're going to electrify parts of HVAC. So we might even double the grid. Rewiring America is also on board with that prediction. Elon Musk predicts we're going to triple the grid. We will see, but certainly the technology is here. We have the tech to green the grid, and we're just 3 doublings away from 98% clean grid, right? So it's just a question of our willpower, and it's both the willpower and the economics. The economics are pretty much at our back now. Wind and solar globally weren't they 2/3 of new power generation in 2020?
Yeah.
So if you're in the business of building power plants, you're building wind, solar, and storage, not generally speaking, coal and nuclear, certainly not here in the West. And that's good. It's good for human health. It's good for stepping back from the brink of climate chaos, which we are so clearly in the midst of now. And our friends in the oil industry are still in denial about this. But they're changing too. You've got a story here about oil major targets 100 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity by 2030.
They got a lot of cash, and they know that the world is changing. Total is the one who also bought pieces of SunPower, and they're pretty big in the renewable space. They have been for a while. This is the French company, and they're just a big energy group, and now they want to own 100 gigs of capacity. An interesting little stat. There's about 650 gigs of solar, and right around that in wind. 650 gigs of wind and solar in the world. So just over a terawatt, 1.2 terawatts. And it's just a neat volume, 100 gigs in the next 10 years. In 10 years, we're going to double that capacity. We're going to be at 2 terawatts. So these people want to own, say, 5% of the world's renewable energy capacity. That's a nice round number. 100 gigs. I mean, that's $50 billion of solar and roughly the same, it's $100 billion of hardware. That's pretty neat. I just thought it was cool that a big oil company wants to have that much in assets, because these are electricity producing assets. This is different than an oil well. Maybe. I mean, it's just spitting off revenue, maybe similar to an oil well. So it's interesting to see the big oil players go after it. Shell has their own solar play, and the big oil companies, I would argue, they're not denying it. They explicitly know, no questions asked. What they're doing is milking the cash cow for as long as they can, because that's what they got. They're like, well, I got a hammer and I'm going to keep hitting it, and I'm going to put forward a face that is of absolute confidence because I want my quarterly bonuses, and that's my job. and nobody will ever know who I am, but I will have $1 million because I lied for big oil. And that's how it works. And they're not, they don't really think it's not real. They just want to get paid. So this company wants to get paid by owning assets instead of talking crap.
Yeah, I think this trend will only accelerate that the oil majors are going to get into renewable energy, the smart ones that want to survive, right? Because it is a change or die scenario, even though there's probably 10 to 20 more years of, profitability in oil and gas. Oil and gas, we need oil and gas. We need that around for a rainy day, though. I don't want to just burn it all in the next couple of decades. I want to save it for 1,000 years, make the transition, and then have it as an emergency supply if we were to have, for example, a meteor strike and the earth gets really cloudy for a decade, which, as we know, does happen. And you're running for cover, and solar's not going to work real well in that scenario. And you're going to want fossil fuels or nuclear or some other technology. Speaking of other tech, though, John, you got a story about compressed air, which is one of my favorites. You don't see a lot of compressed air stories in the news, but here is one from Israel on Energy Trend, Israeli solar
And
energy
it,
storage site. Go ahead.
and they also have a really great website for if you scroll up, they have good data on components, subcomponents in the supply chain. So up in that little bar there, they'll break down the cost of all the little tiny pieces: solar cells, solar wafers, modules, glass, all kinds of neat stuff. So that's why I follow them, and they have good stories too. They have a lot of good pricing for solar panels from Taiwan. They're very, very connected with Asia and solar panel pricing. So good site if you want to see
You're talking
true
about
costs.
here the solar storage and EV links, or what links are you referring to?
Well, let me find it for you real quick because they're up there in that top list. And so if you go to say price trend and then solar price and battery price.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, and they break down all the. So that's I like to go there and just see what's going on with polysilicon, see what's going on with cells or wafers, then cells, just to see where pricing might move. There's a lot of different cell sizes now, so it's you see one size of cell trending up, another size trending down, and this is we're in an evolution of hardware, and so it's kind of neat to watch. And I like to share that particular chart on Twitter just to get people some knowledge. So this compressed air system, it's a solar plus compressed air, and it's 120 megawatt hours, so it's not trivial in size, and it's got a PPA at 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour. That's pretty awesome. Um, you just 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. That's a great price. 120 megs. I mean, I don't know how much land it takes up with that equipment. Are we just going to float these big balloons somewhere? Um, but it's just neat. It's neat to see that somebody actually got a contract for 120 megawatt hour uh, compressed air facility. Not too long ago, 100 megawatt hour battery would have been, 2 years ago, that would have been the largest lithium ion battery on earth. 2 years ago. Ooh, pardon. And nowadays, it's not small, but still, this is 100 megawatt hour battery of air. I just like that. It's kind of neat. So, who knows how it's going to scale? It's got an efficiency of 75 to 81. Nice number, but I don't know. It's pretty neat. It's a big battery. It's attached to solar. It's clean and it's air. It's compressed air. So I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, super clean, right? You just need steel tanks to stuff the air into. That's established technology. And I mean, you can also do compressed air in existing caverns. It looks like they're using tanks here, but um, even here in Illinois, we have huge caverns of natural gas storage, and
Hmm.
they're natural geologic formations that are relatively stable, and the oil and gas companies use them for storing natural gas, and you can use them for compressed air. So when the natural gas industry collapses, we'll just replace it with compressed air.
Or hydrogen. Or hydrogen.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So do you want to do one more or you want to call it a day?
Oh, come on. Why would we ever? We got to do at least two more. Record long wind turbine blade, because that one's really easy. It's just big. It's just big. I like, it beat the prior one by like a meter. So it's just a new wind turbine blade. And I just want to make sure everybody knows, it doesn't look special. It just looks like a long piece of composite, but it's 108 meters. And it gives significant output increases to the hardware it's going to be going on. The first test unit will be installed sometime later this year, and it'll go to the market sometime in 2024 is what the article said. And it's just neat. We have a 15 gigawatt or megawatt nacelle, 15 megawatt wind turbine out there now. I bet you this blade is going to be on a 15 megawatt turbine soon. Even though there is not one announced by this company yet, it's coming. They might be at 14 megs right now, but they'll have a 15 soon, maybe 16, maybe 17. We're going to have 20 megawatt wind turbines before 2025. And that's pretty sweet. So I just wanted to talk about a really long wind turbine blade because who doesn't
Yeah, I
want to talk
think this
about?
is super impressive. The B108, and it's hard to get this to grok the scale because there's not a lot of things. I mean, there's some shipping containers in that photo, so you could see what a shipping container looks like. I mean, 108 meters, that's 3 football fields.
No,
Um,
that's one football field. 100 yards is a football field.
okay, 1 football field. Excuse me.
Yes. I
So
played
it's
football, so I know this.
it's a football field.
Yes. A
Um,
little bit longer though. It's football field and the end zone. It's like nice.
and
This
that
is
means
this is a long thing.
tower is about twice that tall.
Probably, but sometimes they sit pretty low. So, sometimes the blades can come much closer to the ground than the tower is. So it's not necessarily I don't know any rules of thumb, but this is probably an offshore wind blade. Well, not probably. It is an offshore. And
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but
It says it's a
those things out at the ocean, they're
14
giant.
megawatt, 14 megawatt, reaching up to 15 megawatt turbine. 222 diameter, right? So 2 blades gives you the diameter. And yeah, it doesn't say the height of the tower, but yeah, it's impressive. These because heck,
Yep.
around here in Illinois, John, we have a lot of wind farms, but these are usually 2.5 or 3 megawatt turbines. That's the standard.
Mhm.
And so these are, gosh, more than yeah, five times.
Four or five times bigger, man. Really
Yeah.
cool. Really cool. Texas, man. We got to talk about Texas again.
Yeah, I am, it's a blessing in disguise, right? That these catastrophes are happening. I know it's really horrible for those residents of Texas. They're still cleaning up the mess. Now they're cleaning up the burst pipe mess. But how do you see the disaster in Texas, and what's the answer?
Well, I mean, I think this is actually one of the first or second or third climate change induced power grid failures. I do believe this summer we had a heat wave power grid failure, and this winter we had a cold wave power grid failure. And we had one in California and we had one in Texas. So now the left wingers and the right wingers, nobody can talk crap. Everybody messed up. And this is a not trivial thing. The Texas electricity demand spiked from a 40 gigawatt demand up to about 70, 75. And that was the summer peak. But the utility, the grid managers never thought that the summer peak might be the winter peak. And so that's what happened. They did the winter peak, the summer peak, and bam, destroyed it. And this is representative of a shift. One, we're electrifying. 60 some percent of houses in Texas are already electric heat. It's mainly because they don't use a lot of heat. So otherwise they'd probably be using gas historically. But the houses that were gas heated, they were the ones that were getting primary gas. And that led to partially why the gas grid, why the electric grid crashed. So this is the little dance of interactions of electric and gas and fossils and the power grid, the size, the strength, the needs, the hardware we're using. We throw in tens of millions of cars, we're going to be stressing the grid even more. So there's this combination of things plus climate change. It's all happening. And with what we do, distributed solar and storage, those two products and our vehicles, vehicle to grid, vehicle to house, not even vehicle to grid. What about just straight up vehicle to house? Um, these tools are specifically suited to support this type of failure. The article that we wrote here, the company name is Enchanted Rock. Enchanted Rock. They do microgrids. Most of their grids have a gas component. So this is solar plus storage plus gas. In fact, it's probably mostly gas with solar plus storage added separately, but they're microgrids. These microgrids stayed up. All of them stayed up. Some of them were even supporting the power grid. I think there's going to be something very interesting that's going to occur. Maybe, Massachusetts, I've seen them talk about it. They've talked about strengthening the power grid starting at the end of the circuit. Every single circuit, every single power line, having an analysis of demand, having an analysis of generation, knowing where it is in the system, and then building up. So you get past your circuit, you get to your local substation, you know everything, all the demand and generation on that substation and the energy storage. And you make some judgment calls. How much solar plus storage plus demand, and how should we balance it out? Should we have 40% of our electricity always ready to be generated locally on a local node, on a local substation? I think that at some point, we need to become a nation of individual power plants, our power plants, and 20, 30, 40% of our power grid needs to be fully distributed, 100% distributed, so that if something occurs, the people are protected. If the central thing can't handle complex events, which we have chosen to create via our increase of temperature variability on the earth. And now we're going to deal with it. And now our grids are going to collapse. California had a heat wave. Probably, they haven't confirmed it, but probably the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth occurred and led to their grid crashing. And California projected it. They said about a year in advance, they said, we're going to have problems. This is going to occur. They didn't expect it this past year. They expected it next year because they were shutting down gas turbines, but they also didn't predict the hottest temperature ever measured on Earth. So it's now time for us to evolve. And just like computers maybe started off as big mainframes, just like giant nukes were giant power plants, now it's distributing. And now I have a cell phone that has a computer that can go to Mars. I have, my own power source. I can make food locally. There's, individuals are gaining power like they used to back in the day. We used to make our own food. We used to make our own goods. Then we civilized, we specialized, we distribution of labor. Now it's fiddling again. There's gonna be a lot of solar plus storage sold to him, and people will say, well, the liberals and the conservatives, both their grids crashed. Who's right? The solar plus storage people. That's it. It's gonna be big. People died down there in Texas, tens of them, tens to 50s, maybe even triple digits from this storm, and it sucks, and it's not going to
Yeah,
stop.
some of the stories that I've heard are pretty horrific. People having to drink swimming pool water, people having to melt snow to have water to flush their toilets, and there's some real suffering going on for sure, and it's unavoidable. That's the thing, John, is if we just get a little more proactive about this, we have the technology by distributing the grid, giving every home or every neighborhood solar and storage capabilities. Then we're putting less strain on the bigger grid, right? The bigger grid is going to last longer. It's going to be cheaper. We're going to save money. We're going to have more resilience and ultimately a happier future for everybody on Earth. And that's the thing, it's a win-win. We don't have to give up civility. or civilization to do this. And clearly, the alternative of not doing it is suffering. And I don't want to be without power. We have to remember 75% of the population starves to death if the grid goes down, okay, for any length of time. And that's how dependent we are. We are largely no longer able to hunt and gather our way to uh, survival. And there is a select group of people, the Amish among them. I live near an Amish community here in Central Illinois, and I think those guys know how to survive off grid because they mostly rely without the grid. Um, so I say, good wake up call. It is suffering. I feel for those folks down there, and we need an army of plumbers now to go clean up the mess, and electricians. And it's happy days for those contractors who are selling solar and storage, though, because there's going to be a lot of it. So if you're not already a solar and
Yep.
storage installer, get in the game. Speaking of such, John Weaver, how can our listeners reach you, the commercial solar guy?
All kinds of ways. Commercialsolarguy.com, or just type me into Google and you'll find me. I write for PV Magazine. I write on my own website. I have a Twitter account that I try to be very active on just to share the news. LinkedIn as well. I just try to keep myself out there. So just type commercial solar guy into Google and you will find me.
If you ever want to see a blog post about what we're talking about, John is creating blog posts about many of the episodes of the Clean Power Hour at commercialsolarguy.com at the news tab. So check that out. I want to also let our listeners know that they can find all of our episodes on the Continental Energy Solutions website, cesnrg.com/podcast. And these are just clickable to watch the video or listen to it on your smartphone. And then also the solar podcast interviews, which I do twice weekly now. Most recently brought you Ken Sanger of Snake Tray. Ken has an amazing story. He's a solar entrepreneur twice over, and also the director of business development for Snake Tray. He is selling a wonderful cable management solution for ground mount and rooftop solar. And then things like storage systems integration with Enion and Jason Beacock, deep decarbonization of solar with Michael Parr. NREL, we did a great rundown on HOP, the hybrid optimization and performance platform for grid scale hybrid power plants. So check it out at cesnrg.com. I want to thank my co-host, John Weaver, for being here every week. So have a wonderful day, John.